That's a yield sign.
Hello and welcome to HCCLA's Reasonable Doubt. My name is Murray Newman and I am your host along with my co-host and treasurer extraordinaire, Justin Harris.
I'm still here.
I'm having a full circle moment because the first time I was ever on the show was 16 years ago. I was still an assistant district attorney at the DA's office, and my host was Mark Bennett, who is our guest tonight.
Howdy.
You know, I would say we've lost some hair, but it was already pretty bad.
Yours was gone.
Yeah.
I've lost a bunch since then.
You had a ponytail.
I remember
Not
that.
not back then, but a few years before.
You know,
that.
I mean, we had all watched the James Woods True Believer criminal defense movie. He had the ponytail, and obviously you were very, very inspired by
James Woods. Still am.
Well, I'm glad to have you back. This is the first time I've hosted that you've been here, so
It's been a while since I've been here.
When was the last time you were here?
Shoot, I don't know. I've got zero episodic memory. I couldn't tell you.
You know, I always tell people that when you're at the DA's office, it's kind of a timetable. Like I was assigned to this court when this thing happened. But you go out into the defense world, it's just a free-for-all. You don't remember anything anymore. And I mean, there are cases, like I'll get a call sometimes from somebody, and I'll be like, did I represent you 2 months ago or like 5 years ago?
I have that today.
It's crazy.
Yeah, we talked to you, 8 months ago about this. I'm sorry, I've talked to a bunch of people since 8 months ago. And I'm sure I'll remember if I see your face.
Right.
Well, we got a lot of things going on. It's a new year, new administration at the DA's office, new administration in Washington as of Monday. Lot going on in the world, and a lot of it having some effects on our criminal justice world. But with all those topics, I kind of want to talk about an old topic that we had been dealing with HCCLA prior to the administration changes, and that is cameras in the courtroom and live streams.
Sure, yeah.
So why don't you give us a lead in on that, Mark?
So cameras in the courtrooms are cool. The county has a system set up so that the courts can stream. But with great power comes great responsibility, and some judges misuse the responsibility that comes with the camera, and they get excited about having the cameras, and they get excited about having an audience, and they don't treat people with the dignity and respect that the law requires. You know, we have these people who are on the bench and they've been elected, and we treat them with dignity and respect because that's considered to be what we owe them, even though they're not necessarily personally deserving of it. But in exchange, they're supposed to treat us and our clients and everybody else with dignity and respect. And we had Judge Fleischer, who, with the cameras on him and with the attention that he was getting from people on YouTube and from people reposting his YouTube videos, was not treating people with the respect that he should have been. And so we're seeking to change his behavior, and it was an exciting thing, I think, for David Fleischer to have this sort of attention, to be popular.
And so, you know, you and I, because you and I are a little bit older than Justin. I think you've got 2 or 3. I think you've got 2 or 3 years ahead of me in being licensed, but we're more or less contemporaries. Right. You've been a defense attorney far longer than I have, but you know, we have kind of been defense attorneys, or at least criminal practicing lawyers during the court TV era. You know, we came in. Were you licensed when the OJ trial was going on?
No.
Right after.
Right. Yeah.
And so, you know, I don't know if your memory is the same as mine, but it seems to me that, like, as we ended the 90s and went into the early 2000s, we kind of had this eking into having cameras start televising trials, and so I kind of think about it because I was in Judge Ted Poe's court when there was talk about filming a death penalty case all the way. It's like a British corporation. You remember this?
Vaguely do. Yeah.
And Judge Poe had like made an agreement to let them even film deliberations. And, you know, a fan favorite, Warren DeProm, was the chief on that, and he had already agreed to it without running it by Chuck Rosenthal, who was the DA at the time, and said, sure, you know, the state's got no problem with you filming jurors debating, doing death deliberations. And, you know, it was one of those things that even Chuck Rosenthal had to pump the brakes on when he, you know, when he found out about it.
Even Chuck.
But, you know, we've gone to that to where now you have courts on YouTube. And I mean, it seems like we moved through that from point A to point B real fast.
Sure, sure, and of course, COVID did its role in moving the courts to the TVs and getting the cameras in there and getting the infrastructure built so that it's so easy for a court to broadcast its proceedings. And I think that transparency is good. I think it's good for people to be able to see what's going on in their courts. I don't think it's good for judges to play to the cameras.
And I think that's the point. I think that, I mean, I know I'm certainly in favor of the idea of, I wish more people did the old school court watching, you know, like came in and actually knew what they were talking about before they went to the Chronicle's comment sections to tell us how we're, you know, all hug-a-thug and everybody's getting loose, being let loose. But I think more information about how we do that is good. But you bring up the pandemic, where I think that it really went widespread, at least in Harris County, on that, with more judges starting to air their dockets, to run their dockets and trials. But they all seem to just kind of set the camera there and then just go.
Yes, and I think in a lot of courts it's just a tool for communication with litigants who can't make it to court, and that's fine, right? So you bring up Court TV. Court TV found that there was all this potentially free drama that they could then broadcast, and
you mean Court TV, the network,
right?
The network,
yes.
Court TV, right, found that there was all this free drama, right? They don't have to write the script because the drama sort of writes itself. Now you got to cut out 90% of the trial to have really the dramatic stuff, but that's a lot easier than actually writing it. And now with courts like Court 5 broadcasting their proceedings, people are watching and they're like, oh, look at the judge in his fancy monkey suit, and look how he's telling this defendant that he's going to spank him. Ooh, this is very exciting. And so they're finding, you know, the people who don't even have the Court TV money to produce the stuff, to edit the stuff, are finding this free source of drama. And most of what we do in court is boring. Most of what judges do in court is boring. And to feed that drama and to get more time on TV and get more love and get more, you know, more hugs and strokes and whatever you get from social media, I think there's a great temptation for a judge to play it up for the camera, which is
problematic.
Problematic at best, right?
So let's talk about some of that, because I talked to some people about this who have some more experience in his court about some of the things that you're talking about. What are some examples that, you mentioned spanking a defendant. What are some examples of some things that are problematic that he's done or said? So
just best example. That's the best example I can think of, because generally I don't watch video.
What about the example? There was something about a student in a baseball scholarship.
Okay, so there are two things that he did that identifiably hurt people, and I don't think he went off intending to hurt people, but because he was playing to the cameras, he hurt people. And I'm sure that there are many more. This is just the tip of the iceberg, but these are the two things that we know about. One is there was a guy in baseball who was a high school baseball player, was on the high school team, had a scholarship lined up to college, and because people were watching him on Judge Fleischer's TV, and because Judge Fleischer was playing to the camera, it came out that there was some drug use that came out, which at least jeopardized his place on the high school team as well as his college scholarship. The other example that we know about is that Judge Fleischer disclosed on camera the existence of an expunged case. And I don't know how the expunged case came to the judge's attention, but expunged cases aren't supposed to be talked about. Right. Certainly aren't supposed to be talked about on camera. These were both lapses in judgment that perhaps a judge who wasn't trying to play the cameras wouldn't have fallen for, wouldn't have engaged.
I want to pause real quick because number one, you forgot to remind me, we do monitor our Facebook Live comments for questions. If you're trying to text me or Justin, we don't check our text messages, but we are looking at Facebook Live, and we have actually a pretty extraordinary amount of comments already.
Oh, really?
Which is unusual, and they're from some names I recognize, but some that I'm not, and so I kind of want to jump in because clearly there are some people that disagree with us or disagree with you. I tend to agree with you on this, that there needs to be some level of control.
They have a right to be wrong, Murray.
That's what you've been telling me for like 25 years now. Someone says, I have never seen a judge. Fred Green says, I have never seen a judge mistreat somebody just because a camera was on.
That judge or any judge?
He just says a judge.
Okay.
Apparently there's some buffering
Well,
issues.
and is that what you're saying, that he's mistreating people because a camera's on?
So mistreating implies to me an intent to harm. I don't think he has an intent to harm. I think his heart's in the right place.
Okay.
I think that he, because the camera's on, is doing things that wind up hurting people. And also I think because the camera's on, he is treating people without the dignity and respect that he owes them. And he might say, well, it's tough love, right? Well, yeah, but he's not the guy to give them tough love because the rules say that he has to treat people again, and I'm going to repeat it again and again and again, with dignity and respect. And dignity and respect is not acting like he's their father who's threatening to spank them.
Right.
Dignity and respect is treating them like an adult. He's an adult, trying to have an adult communication with them. And if there's somebody who should be giving them the tough love, it's not him. That's not his job.
Our elected officials aren't supposed to be doling out mores, and that's an easy no.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I do want to get to some of these comments because I don't want to be accused of hiding any of them, because some of them are supportive.
Sure.
But so we have Bill Henderson, who says, I feel Judge Fleischer has done more to humanize defendants than I have ever seen before. Judge Fleischer has made me reconsider long-held biases and see the challenges mental health issues can bring.
That's a great thing.
Yeah.
And
yeah, no doubt.
if people are confronting their biases, and I have seen compassion from the bench in Court 5 when Judge Fleischer's up there. Absolutely. I've seen some of the mocking things that you're talking about and some of the concerns that other people have expressed.
Well, and I think his heart is in the right place. And
Sure.
I think generally
he's not a bad
there's
person.
been resistance in the criminal defense bar to setting this straight, because generally I think he treats defendants generally fairly.
Right.
And maybe even better than a lot of the judges down there treat them.
Sure.
However, there's a body of evidence that shows him as a judge who doesn't behave the way that a judge should behave. And I understand that people who don't spend time down at court look at it, and it's fun to watch. And he's helping some people. But the job, the robe, you put on the robe, and he sometimes doesn't wear the robe, but the job, the bench is owed the dignity and respect. Whoever gets elected to that position owes it to the position and to the people before him to be more than just not to clown and not to use it for his personal social advantage.
Sure. It's an interesting thing you just said that stuck with me, though, because I'm a very big fan of yours, and your knowledge of history is impressive to me. But is there anything to the fact that judges wear a relatively nondescript black robe, except for Judge Draper, who wears a navy robe, which is awesome? Is there something to that? And now that you say that, I haven't walked into Court 5 and seen him in a robe, and there's several other judges wearing a robe either. And some of what he does wear seems a little different than what he used to wear. But is there something to wearing a black robe that a judge is supposed to kind of put them out there as a neutral person and make what they're wearing and doing?
Self-evidently, right?
Right.
I mean, it's this uniform that's unadorned and church-like.
Right.
Right? You think of who wears robes, and you think of churchmen, and you think of the choir, and it's not, the choir doesn't wear the robes so that everybody stands out. The choir wears the robes so that everybody looks the same,
Blends
so that all
in.
the judges are the same.
Right.
He's the judge, right? He wasn't elected to be popular. He was elected to call the balls and strikes fairly.
In that one court.
in that one court.
Right.
So there's definitely some pretty strong supporters here, which I don't see the name. I don't recall the names before.
Well, and that's the thing with this is the reach of this is so far and wide. I mean, I have gotten family members from other states who have reached out and, do you know this judge?
We've gotten some cast off of his fan club coming to Reasonable Doubt. So we should have done this a long time ago.
And that's fine. I mean, that's fine.
So someone posed the question, like, did you? It was posed directly at you, but like, did you feel this way about the judge that you supported who was censured? And then they go on to clarify they're talking about Franklin Bynum. And I think that people need to know that anytime someone's running for office and they haven't before, we support them. I supported Kim Ogg when she ran the first time. I came to deeply regret that.
So I represented Judge Bynum in his trial in the Supreme Court courtroom.
Okay.
And that accusation was trumped up. Honestly, it was based on a lie, and the lie was told by the district attorney's office, and the lie, once it was told, was nearly impossible to stop. The worst of those accusations, however, against Judge Bynum was that he had not treated prosecutors with dignity and respect. And that was the one thing that I thought was I wouldn't say that I thought it had merit, but that was the thing that I thought was most dangerous.
Yeah.
The accusation,
if proven.
And I wasn't there at the time, so I don't know what happened. But if proven, I thought that was probably grounds for at least a reprimand. The thing, however, that the commission latched onto was not that. And if they had just said, look, these prosecutors in his court said that he treated them without dignity and respect, boom, 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 I wouldn't be able to gainsay it. I wasn't there at the time, and if you're a judge and you're treating people without that dignity and respect, I think that you need to be disciplined.
I think it's worth pointing out that Judge Fleischer, prior to running, is somebody that it was pretty popular with all of us. We all liked him, and I know that it has been an issue that has frustrated you with HCCLA not perhaps wanting to go after him as aggressively as we might have, like a more disliked judge. Like when we had Robert Johnson on the bench, I think that if Robert Johnson had been doing what Judge Fleischer is doing, that we probably would have had like half the membership ready to put him on blast. But there's been some level of, and I'll admit to being part of this, to like, man, but it's Judge Fleischer, he's a great guy, and like some reluctance based on how much I personally like him versus, if it was some judge that we already didn't like. And I know you've expressed frustration with that, and I think it's intellectually honest that you do. But the thing that that if the allegations that have concerned me the most, and I have not witnessed this with my own eyes, but I've certainly heard it from people that are monitoring it, is that he developed a YouTube channel. So it's beyond just how he acts on the bench. There for a while there were some issues over what was he doing with these clips later, because he had like his own YouTube channel, which I think is concerning, and then I heard that at some point he was interacting with viewers, with commenters during proceedings, and I don't know if that was proven or not.
Someone showed me messages of people who appear to be court staff having conversations during docket on like a chat forum with people who are not in the courtroom about the docket in the courtroom and the things that are going on in the video feeds. And I've seen some of those messages. I haven't been part of those conversations, but I think that there's more. I think a lot of people's concerns are more than just cameras in the courtrooms.
So he's shut down the YouTube channel.
Okay.
And still broadcasting from the courtroom, which is fine. That's transparency. There's a county channel in which is broadcasting, and I don't know that he had taken clips of his to produce in the YouTube channel, but I know that there were other people who were doing so and monetizing his content, which is, I'm a First Amendment lawyer, and that's constitutionally protected behavior, which brings us back to what he's doing to promote that, right? How he's behaving differently than other judges because he's on camera. And yeah, there was a chat on the YouTube channel, and he was participating in the chat, and I don't know that he was during trials, but you know, at the beginning he'd say hello to people, and now that there's no YouTube channel, I think he's not doing that anymore.
Well, my understanding is this is an app. I don't know. I don't have the app. It's called like Discourse or
Discord, yeah.
Okay, it's a social media
right,
app.
and that was something we're getting. He definitely has a fan club over this. With like we have someone, and I don't recognize. I may be wrong, but I don't recognize these people as lawyers that are commenting in like, "Oh, you heard? Well, that's hearsay. He's a good judge. This didn't happen." These comments are happening.
I'm not saying he's not a good judge, but there are some concerns about some things that are going on in his courtroom, and that's all that people were trying to talk about.
And he could be a good judge and treat everybody before him with dignity and respect.
Absolutely.
And as a result, there wouldn't be these clips out there saying, "Oh, judge threatens to spank guy." I mean, that's the worst of it, right?
Right.
That this is the best evidence that he's not treating people with dignity and respect is the way that the people who are feeding his fans are promoting the material. Right?
Well, and you know, and I think about that because like I remember when Shauna Reagan was on the bench, and when Shauna Reagan was on the bench, she had a tendency to always end up doing the right thing. Like I had her doing things that I didn't think other judges would do, like give someone a second chance at probation when they had screwed up. But she was so brutally rude to some of the people that came before her that it just overshadowed what was the point, which is at the end of the day, the judge is there to call balls and strikes and get to the sentence, and it's this extra stuff that is demeaning the dignity of the court and causing the problems that concern us.
Yeah, and it's good TV. There's no doubt about it. I mean, that's why people watch, right? That's why you watch.
Yeah, I mean, Judge.
But that's not. I'm sorry, it's not the way a judge should behave.
And he got retweeted by Senator Cory Booker, a very prominent United States senator, and I mean it just kind of exploded after that.
I think it had exploded pretty well before then.
Yeah. And you know, and in fairness, before all this exploded, when I first realized that he was broadcasting it all, because I saw it on TikTok, because you know I'm 12, and I had seen him pop up on TikTok, and I had texted him, and I was like, "Did you know you're on TikTok?" And at least his response to me, and this probably would have been middle of last year, his response to me at that time indicated that he was not aware, that he had maybe heard that like somebody had rebroadcast something that he had done. And so at that time I asked him to come on the show, and he was a little bit reluctant to come on the show. And he said because a lot of what he had received was hate mail for some of the things that he had said. Now that was August, July, you know, like we said, it all runs in together now. But I think it's a debatable point.
Are these public?
Yeah.
Is Victoria Guzman Bernal the coordinator for the court?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I've only had a handful of cases in there.
Mark, you apparently need to check your inbox.
Oh, good.
Wow, that's a little disconcerting.
We've got the Fleischer Mafia is after us.
Yeah.
But you know, but going back to the Discord. So Discord, and correct me if I'm wrong, is basically it's like a Facebook. It's a social media thing, typically for gamers, right? It's something where people.
I know. I think it started out that way, but there are Discord. You can have a Discord server for whatever you want, sort of specialized,
right?
Narrow interest chats, and they're not, and the channels, the servers don't overlap pretty much one into another. So, yeah, I mean, you can have a Discord server for, you know, talking about a game, or for I know about Discord servers for tuning cars.
Okay.
Right. You know, and you could have a Discord server for law, and you could invite your friends to the
Reddit,
Discord server.
Kinda.
Except you have to be, it's smaller. You have to join the server.
Yeah, that's my understanding is that the group where these people were
Reddit's much
groups.
broader, but like a subreddit, except that a closed subreddit.
Members
maybe,
only.
Yeah. But within the server, you have multiple channels. It's, you know, it's a way to communicate. I browsed the Discord, and I didn't see anything that was obviously Judge Fleischer talking to the people in the Discord, post move off of YouTube.
Right.
But
Miss Bernal would like you to know that she's at home on her free time, and don't act like you don't know that she's there.
I'm just.
So
Thanks, Vicky. I'll see you tomorrow.
So what's she saying about
She's very defensive.
Okay.
Kathleen Kelly says, "I am just here to lie." The internet is a funny place.
Yeah, I'm just here to lie.
Yes, and definitely definitely getting people riled up on the internet about somebody's misdemeanor case has no downside to it.
Yeah.
It demonstrates itself, right?
Right.
You know,
And it should be known, like, Judge Fleischer's been on this show, what, 3-4 times? Apparently more than Mark Bennett's been on the last decade. We had him on when he was in the three-way primary race, I think, with Armin Merjanian and Aaron Saldana. And then he's come on a couple of times since then. So Judge Fleischer's always welcome to come back if he wants to talk about this.
And the thing is,
or Ms. Bernal?
Yeah, Vicky can come on, I guess.
I mean, I love Dave. I mean,
That's the funny thing.
That's all
you say that in the board meetings, like the discussion. Everyone's Dave this, Dave that. Like
we love him. You know,
this is a conflicted thing. But some of the stuff that's happening on those videos in his courtroom, when you look and you realize that there's what are we up to? 40 judges now. 39?
Yeah.
He's the only one doing this, and I don't know if someone has sat down and like seen if the recidivism rate in his court is different. That's what his goal is, right? His intention is to lower crime.
Well, sure. I mean, because the defendant benefits if the defendant stops
he's trying to do the tough on crime thing, right?
And I've dealt with other judges who, in order to do who lost track of the fact that they have to follow the law and they have to treat people with dignity and respect, regardless of whether that forwards their goals. This is sort of like the deal with Judge Jordan.
So if he's doing that and he thinks it's going to get results, I'd like him to show that there's like a reason for why he's not using dignity and respect if he's not being dignified and respectful.
Would he say that he's not being dignified and respectful, though?
Well, I haven't seen a clip of him saying he would spank somebody, but if a sitting judge says that they're going to use corporal punishment on a defendant in their courtroom, that doesn't sound very dignified or respectful to me.
Well, and you know, and if we were to kind of extrapolate this back a little bit, I think that we in HCCLA took a position that, you know, that it bothered us, like when Montgomery County or other entities started posting mug shots of people, you know, when they're arrested, because you start on Facebook, or, you know, in my hometown of Bryan College Station, they have the Busted newspaper where everybody, you get arrested in Brazos County, you can go to the gas station, pay $1 and get this printout of everybody's.
Oh, Magnolia, it's called the Potpourri.
Yeah, that's very artsy.
Magnolia, Tomball, Waller got it.
The Potpourri.
So,
but you know, at some point, you have people that are getting extra attention when, you know, it goes without saying that these people are innocent until proven guilty.
Sure.
And they're not being treated as such.
And if and when their cases are dismissed or they get not guilties, they're entitled to expunctions, but the stuff on the internet's never going to be expunged. We talked to a guy outside his courtroom who had already been, you know, blasted on TikTok, and his friends had seen him on TikTok with some embarrassing petty crime. And yeah, it is generally pretty petty stuff.
Yeah.
But still, you're charged with DWI or shoplifting or, you know, failure to stop and give information or whatever. Don't want that out there for the rest of your life.
Right, and you know, and since we do seem to have a lot of non-lawyers tuning in, you know, if a person is found not guilty or the case gets dismissed, they have a right to a legal procedure, which is an expunction, which legally erases it from ever happening, and they are entitled to that under the law, that it just did not happen. But what do you do because the internet is forever?
And if they get a deferred adjudication probation, they're entitled to non-disclosure, which seals it from public view, and again, they can deny that it ever happened. And this is vastly the majority of all the cases that go before Judge Fleischer are eventually going to be entitled to one of these remedies. Well, you can never get TikTok expunged.
Right.
Your name's out there. You're out there on YouTube. You're out there on TikTok forever.
Yeah.
And so I guess that's a broader harm than the two that we talked about. Is everybody is getting this publicity that they wouldn't be getting if the judge weren't being a showman.
Yeah, and my joke about that always is when someone comes in for an expunction, they almost, in Brazos County, they almost always want me to go after the busted and all that stuff. They're like, will this help? I'm like, I don't know. Was O.J. Simpson ever charged with murder? You know, you're not supposed to know about that. I mean, it does happen, but you're adding, instead of some dramatic double homicide, you're doing this to people that might have a weed case or DWI or something they very well might be, held, to not be guilty of.
A family violence assault where there's a false allegation. Well, the TV camera doesn't know it was a false allegation, and years down the road you get the case dismissed and it's been expunged. Well, it's still there, and everybody, what your potential girlfriend or boyfriend is going to do before your first date or after the first date is look you up, and they're going to see that thing.
Or you get the lovely charge of terroristic threat. Because you said, I'm going to kill you to somebody. And then you got to explain that to another state where that doesn't.
Where terroristic threat sounds like terrorism.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think that that when we look at this, there is certainly a public right to know. Someone gets charged with a crime, that's public record, and we know that. We don't always like it, but we know that. But in the vast majority of these cases, a big spotlight is not shown on that. And so, we want to have transparency in our courtrooms. We want to have dignity in our courtrooms. We want people to know about what we do all day, but we don't broadcast. There's got to be some level of balance and common sense. And I think the consensus is that Judge Fleischer has pushed that scale dramatically.
In my opinion, he has, and it causes harm to people. And I appreciate his viewers who now know something about the criminal justice system that they didn't before. Maybe they had assumptions before that have been contradicted by Judge Fleischer's behavior. That's great, but at what cost?
Could they also, if just watching one judge, does that give you a real good sense of the criminal justice system?
No, of course not.
So if that's what they really wanted to do, is there a better way than doing it on their phone? On a place called TikTok.com or whatever? Yeah, if you want to know about the court system, if you're these people messaging us, it's a publicly open building. There are 40 courts, not just Judge Fleischer. Great judges like him in all those buildings. If you actually care about that, come on down. Otherwise, get out from behind your computer. You can see my face. Let me see yours.
That's work, Justin. And a lot of these folks, to be fair, a lot of these folks are shut-ins. They're in mom and dad's basement. They're in California or somewhere where they can't see actual stuff going on in court for whatever reason. They're not in Texas, right? They're not in Houston. And so, we do things in special ways in Texas. Texas criminal court is different than everywhere else. Houston is special. So to be fair, not everybody has the advantage of being able to drive down to 1201 Franklin and go move from floor to floor and see what's going on. And maybe Judge Fleischer, just being Judge Fleischer from before the spotlight was on him, would be entertaining enough that people would still watch. I think Judge Fleischer has changed his behavior, has changed his attire, has changed the way that he deals with the people before him because of the cameras. And if he hasn't, I'd be surprised if he hasn't, because, like you say, people generally liked Judge Fleischer before, and he wasn't the kind of guy to treat people badly.
Here's an interesting comment, and this tracks with some other stuff, is that people are traveling to come see him. To come see him in court, and we have a Jennifer Boggart who says that she watches judges from all over the country, and she will be here in March. She hopes to see us all.
Okay.
And that is, and Leslie Fusion would like you to know that she is not a shut-in. But that it adds an element that makes it difficult for us to do our job. That like if we've got a guy charged with driving while license suspended and suddenly he's been treated like a Menendez brother, it's adding a level of difficulty for what should be a relatively minor offense that, that might have been a run-of-the-mill case, and all of a sudden, oh no, we saw this one. This is a bad one on Judge Fleischer's channel or whoever's broadcasting it over. And it's adding an extra layer of punishment, and it's kind of evaporating your due process in the process.
It skews things, definitely. And if you were just a judge like the 15 other misdemeanor court judges who were just going about their day's business, people probably wouldn't watch, because it's not fun stuff to watch generally. But they're, some of them are doing a lot of good for the people before them anyway, without being buffoons about it.
That makes the next thing. If the intent really is the conversation he's having with the person in front of him, why does he need the cameras there? Can't he still get that message across to each individual who comes in front of him without it being broadcast and then archived and then clipped up and turn into viral or attempted to turn into viral things?
Sure, right. And it's a loop, right? It's a cycle where
So
we've got the camera and we've got the behavior. Well, the camera feeds the behavior and the behavior feeds the camera.
That's what that sounds like. But if his intention isn't that, if that's not what's happening, then it should be simple for him to turn off the camera and still affect the same change in the world.
Well, and
right?
and to go back a few steps, that these were things because, you know, we generally do like Judge Fleischer. Is that, and this was one of the things that frustrated you, is that a lot of us were just kind of like, hey, can we just have kind of an informal conversation? And that was not well received by the entirety of our membership, that we didn't go a little more aggressive and heavy-handed in that. And so...
he didn't get the message.
The organizations had
He didn't get the message from the organization sending ambassadors to go and talk with him.
Ms. Houston would like us to know that we don't understand this at all.
Okay, thank you.
We don't.
Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate that.
Right, he didn't get the message because it's one of those things where we have gotten to the point where we talked to him nicely. We did a, hey buddy, you know, maybe this isn't the best idea, and to my understanding, didn't stop. HCCLA did escalate this, I guess, right before the break, maybe right after the Christmas break, where we started handing out cards. And my understanding was that on Discord, somebody within that court took a picture of the card that HCCLA was handing out and said they're coming for us, which gets real. Okay. It really creates some interesting dynamics about what happens if you drew that court. You know, if you know, we've always historically. There's always some courts that we enjoy as defense attorneys better. There's courts that prosecutors enjoy better. And then there's some courts that you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I have to go to that court. And where does Court 5 fall for you at this point?
I don't think I've had a case in Court 5. Since
yeah, but if you were to get a client to come in there, would you tell them, okay, I mean, obviously you have to brief them and say, look, there's some things you need to know about that court.
Sure. And I don't know, you know, he's a pleasant enough guy. I would certainly ask that he turn the camera off.
Yeah.
And I understand that he's been acceding to that request when people are making the request that he turn the camera off.
You simply ask him to turn it off, and he turns it off.
Then I think everybody needs to know that they can do that, and then it's up to them whether they do it or not. But you know, it's not. I don't have a lot of misdemeanor cases.
I don't either, and so I.
But that also gives me the freedom to not be the nice guy, to be the heavy, right? To say, you know, Judge, we need to fix this, and to fix it. And Judge Fleischer isn't the first person who I have turned my attention toward for that purpose.
Do you remember some of the discussions in the board around Ramona Franklin and how there were some people who, no, let me put it this way. Judge Fleischer is a great judge, I think, to have a trial in front of. The bond conditions and the time until you get to trial, that can be a little bit difficult on a defendant in the court. But he is extremely approachable. You can always talk to him about amending bond conditions and things like that. And he wants to have a good reason for it. But there's a lot of times a pretty state-friendly presumption on a lot of bond conditions in that court.
Misdemeanor felony bond conditions. Bond conditions are a mess. People watching on TV don't know that this is not just the ordinary course of things, the way that it's supposed to be. Lawyers often don't know that it's not the way that things are supposed to be. So judges don't know that it's not the way that things are supposed to be. Bond is supposed to just assure your appearance.
Right.
And a lot of these bond conditions aren't geared toward that. So no. I don't know specific conditions that are a problem in Court 5, but it's pretty common in Harris County courts for there to be problems with bond conditions.
Yes, universally. But I'm just saying, as far as a judge, your question to Mark, having a client, I have no problem having a client with that in that court. The only difficulty that I sometimes have is with bond conditions, but he's a very approachable judge on those things. Yeah. And
I'm sure that he would treat my clients at least as fairly as everybody else's clients.
Sure.
I never have a doubt about that when I'm, seeking to correct a judge's behavior. I never have a doubt that it's going to. I never think that it's going to harm my clients. I don't operate on the principle that judges have to like me. I operate on the principle that Judges have to follow the law.
Having known you for 25 years, you don't operate on the principle that anybody has to like.
This is true. This is true. Yeah, I'm not. You know, being liked is not a.
It is never.
It's not. It's not a huge priority.
I've always said that my friendship with you is that, like, just when I think you're the greatest guy in the world, you'll do something that makes me so mad I can't believe I'm friends with you. And then when I'm ready to write you off, you'll do something so nice. I'm like, it's Mark. He's just the best. You know.
I contain multitudes.
I mean, you made me cookies for one. I mean, for God's sake, you know,
what
at
kind?
one point, chocolate chip. They're good. They're very good. Had the whole family. But so somebody brought up, you know, why are we not talking about the other courts that stream? And there are plenty of other courts that stream, but as lawyers that go into these courts every day, you don't notice it.
Tell me who else is doing things like telling a defendant that he's going to spank them.
Right.
Tell me who else is getting these clips that's this fantastic behavior that is getting this sort of attention, and I will turn the eye of Sauron upon them.
Sure, but
and I don't know that other courts are that's the whole one thing that hasn't been talked about is the archiving of the streams.
Well, so now that he is broadcasting through the county's channel, anybody can, you know, he's not archiving it, but anybody else can, just like they could archive any other channel that's broadcasting through the county's channel.
But my understanding is, and I've had to deal with this in the past, is that dockets that did even record their video dockets during COVID, as soon as the docket was over, they erased them. Because there was some, I tried to go back and be like, no, the prosecutor said this on the recording, and they'd go, we don't have them anymore.
And I think we go back to, because the judge's behavior is entertaining. Judge's behavior is entertaining because he knows people are watching, and people are watching because the judge's behavior is entertaining, and the footage is being clipped and stored because it's entertaining, right? So it's the same thing Murray was talking about, is this permanent record created of the worst days in people's lives, when in most courts that's not happening. Right. And historically it hasn't happened, that there's this public record.
Yeah, and you know, and 2 points on this is, number one, for ages, was the little blurb that says "do not record" on it.
That's
you know, and that's kind of in one ear out the other. But the other thing is that you talk about, you bring up a good point. This is the worst day of people's lives. You go to felony court, the majority of people there are going to be some fairly hardcore criminals. You know.
The majority?
I would say the majority. If we're going to say over 50%, no, you've got people charged with more serious crimes.
Okay, maybe by Murray Newman's definition of, what was it? Hardcore.
Hard.
Okay, maybe by that, but not by this side of the table's definition.
But
like 1 in 10.
Okay, I should have never paired you two together. But no, but you would agree with me that misdemeanor people, you see a lot of first-timers in there. You're going to see more first-timers and probably only-timers in misdemeanor. Would you agree with the principle that you see more first-timers and only-timers in misdemeanor court than you do in felony?
Sure. Okay,
there's twice as many misdemeanor cases.
Right. No, but sure, let him go on.
Okay, go on.
I'm just saying.
Yes, go on.
That when we have this level of attention to that, it's almost like they get over-punished than anybody else in any of the other 15 courts.
Yes.
And that's what I was asking you earlier. It's like, what do you tell a client when they come in and say, I got a case in court 5? You're like,
we're going to ask the judge to turn off the camera, and the judge is going to shut off the camera, and that eliminates that part of the punishment.
But you have to give a speech that you don't have to give for any of the other 15 courts. And you have to, you know.
You have a speech for each judge, right?
Not each judge. Some judges actually, and somebody just said they loved Ramona. If they're talking about Ramona Franklin, this is a lost cause. But yeah, there are certainly some courts, Robert Johnson, Ramona Franklin, these are ones that you're like, okay, you need to know. Certainly with like Ramona when she was yanking bonds, you know, sua sponte, which apparently her successor is doing as well.
Right.
You know, and that's a conversation that we're going to have in the near future with HCCLA. But yeah, you have to have these conversations with the courts that are doing things that seem to stand out as being particularly unfair to your client.
I see what you're saying. I think, you know, but I think we have that in, there's always that court.
Well, you talk about Robert Johnson, right? I always had a Robert Johnson fee booster, right? We're in this court and I'm charging more just because
You're saying that on TV.
It's not fun.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and you know, and I remember they were doing a study. A reporter called me and he said, you know, that he's got the most efficient docket. Like all the stuff's working out in that court. I'm like, you do realize that's not a good thing, right? Like people are going in there rather than facing a trial with someone who we don't believe can act as a fair judge. And so you feel more desperate to do a plea, to do something to extra.
Get your day in court.
Yeah, I mean, there's more uncertainty, right?
Sure.
And I think sometimes the uncertainty worked out for the defendant's benefit in that particular court, with Judge Johnson. But there was uncertainty, and that uncertainty creates injustice. People are going to plead to things that maybe they wouldn't plead to if
Ramona's Judge Fleischer's
less uncertain.
Court reporter.
Oh,
I don't.
Ramona Saunier. She's awesome.
Oh, well, I thought you just said Ramona. I don't.
I think I said. I'm sorry if I didn't say.
I thought
Ramona Franklin.
He
former
did.
judge of
I
the
thought it
Supreme
was
Court.
Ramona Franklin. Yeah, I thought it was Ramona Franklin, but I don't know about that court. But
to anybody that thinks that this is some personal attack against Vicky, Ramona, Judge Fleischer, anybody, it's not. Like, this is just 3 attorneys who have talked to other attorneys, and there's some people who have some concerns about what might be happening and the motives behind it, or maybe not the intentions, but the motives. And that's all we're talking about.
And something I meant to segue in before we got into this, but I do want to talk about is your nonprofit.
Okay.
I meant to address it on the front side, just skipped right over it. So tell us about your nonprofit.
So I found that there were lots of problems that needed solving that were not for the benefit of just my client, right? And I started looking at them as special projects. Like, there's this thing in the law that needs to be fixed, but none of my clients have the problem, but I know it needs to be fixed, and so let me find clients who have the problem so that we can litigate it through them. Or there's a judge who's doing something the judge shouldn't be doing, not doing it to any of my clients, but nobody else is fixing it. That's a special project. So I eventually, rather than just spend 2/3 of my time doing pro bono special projects, I formed a nonprofit organization, the Institute for Advanced Criminal Law Studies, to do these special projects. Other people have brought their special projects to me so that we can work on them together. But that's the purpose of the 501c3 Institute for Advanced Criminal Law Studies, is to do special projects. An example is the Court of Criminal Appeals, highest court for criminal cases in Texas, court of discretionary review. That means that if you have an appeal and you lose it in the Intermediate Court of Appeals, that you can appeal it up to the Court of Criminal Appeals, and they may not hear it. Or if you win in the Court of Appeals, then the state can file a petition for discretionary review, take it to the Court of Criminal Appeals. I started looking at all of the cases that the Court of Criminal Appeals was hearing, and then on all of the ones in which either the defendant was pro se, because pro se defendant filed a petition, or the state filed a petition for discretionary review and got it granted, or the cases where the Court of Appeals lawyer didn't have a lot of Court of Criminal Appeals experience, volunteering to help with these cases, to help write the brief, to argue the case in the Court of Criminal Appeals if the Court of Criminal Appeals gave argument. And just yesterday, we had a win on one of these cases. Just a factor of me seeing this problem, the problem being that Court of Criminal Appeals is very specialized appellate litigation, and most lawyers and all pro se defendants don't know what they're doing in there, and volunteering to help. I got to argue in the Court of Criminal Appeals twice last year, and we got a reversal from the Court of Criminal Appeals on a case out of Amarillo yesterday.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Congratulations.
So the issue was that pro se defendants in the CCA?
Pro se defendants in the CCA and lawyers without a lot of CCA experience in the CCA. So the state has the state Office of the State Prosecuting Attorney.
Okay.
And small county DA who's going into the Court of Criminal Appeals can get the help from the state prosecuting attorney. The defense doesn't have anything like this. The defense needs to have something like this. Until the defense has something like this, it's me, right? I see these cases, and I know that the lawyer who's never been to the Court of Criminal Appeals before might want some help. And so I volunteer. And they don't always want the help, but when they want the help, I give them the help. And
through
IACLS.
CLS. Okay. That's cool. Okay.
So,
couldn't have condensed those initials at all. It's just
no.
You know, when I first started my blog, they said it was just way too wordy. The title was just way too wordy, you know. So.
But, you know,
Speaking of, do you blog anymore?
No, I don't.
I don't either.
No, I
You know,
don't.
and I started blogging because you did.
Let's start again.
Yeah, I mean,
Let's start.
but that was like what 16 years ago when I started mine. It was 2008, so now we're going on 17.
Was it 20 when I started? So Twitter killed the the practical blogosphere, and Scott Greenfield's still doing it. So maybe if let's do it. Let's start up again.
I texted Scott to get him to try to Zoom bomb you just for fun. He didn't take my call. I guess I don't know where I went wrong with Scott.
You didn't send him a fun pie.
Yeah. But, you know, there's still, you know, for me, like trying to think about something to blog about, like by the time I sit down and write it down, it's a stale topic. You know, like by the time I find time to sit down, it's like, let's talk about that Brown v. Board of Education.
Right.
You know, it's gone. Although at the rate we're going, we may have to discuss that again. But good God.
Those stare decisis there.
Yeah. So that's great. So I can't even figure out how to file my own PLLC. And you've started a nonprofit.
Actually, I've started 2 in the last couple of years. The other one is the First Amendment Funding Organization.
Yeah.
FAFO.
That's a much better.
Okay.
Much better.
And the purpose of that is again to support people in appellate litigation, but of First Amendment issues in the U.S. Supreme Court. So, if you have an appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court, again, it's discretionary review, but it costs a bunch of money to do it right because A, there's a filing fee, and then B, there are printing costs because they want unless you're filing in forma pauperis, which means broke ass, you have to print it in a certain form, and there are 4 or 5 different printers that do it in this form, and it costs several $1,000s to do it right. So we put together some money so that people who have First Amendment appeals, criminal First Amendment appeals, don't have to worry about the filing fees and the printing costs in the U.S. Supreme Court.
Are you still doing that?
Yeah.
And have you got anything like juicy or new that you're like, oh, I got this hot First Amendment topic that's just...
Not right now, but then, if you have a First Amendment case you're taking to the Supreme Court, give me a call.
Trump needs some help with a gag order or something?
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious...
The other First Amendment.
I'm kind of curious with AI and where it's going to take First Amendment now, because it seems like it just broke off all barriers possible. You know, like I was thinking about, and maybe this has been ruled, but I mean, when we talk about things, because I know that revenge porn has been a hot topic of yours that you've talked about and argued that some things are First Amendment on that, but now you have the ability to create things, you know, and I think about the implication of child pornography.
Right.
It seems like we're on the precipice of a whole wide world.
The Supreme Court's dealt with that, haven't they, in child pornography?
Yeah.
With like artificial intelligence.
That's think about trying a child porn case where the government can't necessarily prove that the pictures are actually of
a human,
of an actual human.
Yeah.
It's a defense.
Well, the scary thing is going to. Are you concerned then about how legislatures start trying to write those laws?
I'm curious. I don't know that I'm concerned. I'm curious.
The First Amendment
I mean, it's all
knives.
I mean, there are things where the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals has simply gotten them wrong in the First Amendment context. After I've been battling them for a decade, that's what the U.S. Supreme Court is there for. So eventually, we'll get to the U.S. Supreme Court on some of these and get things straightened out.
But what? Wasn't there a Supreme Court case that had to do with putting a child's face on like an adult's body in a pornographic thing, and and the court said that was okay because it's actually done that there is no child being hurt in this.
Yes.
So,
but there's
it may have the like the AI thing has like the opposite effect, right?
Right.
It's creating this industry where no children are getting harmed.
Well, there was a statute that tried to forbid the virtual child pornography, and the U.S. Supreme Court said, no, you can't forbid the virtual child pornography, because the reasoning behind child pornography being illegal is that the making of it, by definition, harms a child.
Sure.
Right? Because a child is victimized sexually. So yeah, if it becomes widespread and becomes a real problem, you can imagine the legislature writing another statute to criminalize it, and you can imagine the U.S. Supreme Court finding some reason that it's actually, we were wrong about the reason that child porn was illegal in the first place. It's not that the child is harmed in the making of it; it's that that there's ongoing harm to the child who's depicted, which is certainly a valid argument, right? Sure. But it's not the argument that they adopted in the first place when they allowed the criminalization of child porn. But you can imagine how the Supreme Court might make a turnaround,
right?
Because they've made turnarounds before, and they might say, well, we didn't consider enough the harm that's created by the image being out there, and we think that that's okay to forbid.
Right.
I mean, it's not going to hurt my feelings.
No,
right?
Not at all.
People engage in all sorts of atrocious behavior because of social media and the internet.
Right.
And
we are seeing that in our comments.
Yeah, aren't they all so glad they stuck around for this part of the conversation?
All these folks are so mad that we dared to speak against.
Okay.
That's like a cult of personality.
I think it's hilarious, that like.
This is why I'm not on Facebook.
Well, they're. They have a lot of interesting comments. They don't want to talk about anything substantive. They want to go back to why we would dare attack Judge Fleischer.
He's attacking.
No, we're not attacking Judge Fleischer whatsoever.
So,
we may.
Oh,
man. I may.
Yeah,
that's not what this is, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, final thoughts. We got 1 minute left. This has flown by. A lot to talk about.
I don't know. Lots of lawyers don't bother to try to fix the problems. And we have a superpower. We really do. The law license is a superpower, and it gives us the license to make the world a better place in the best ways that we can.
Yeah, and at some point that may happen sooner rather than later. But we'll see.
Small steps. How do you eat an elephant?
Yeah, no kidding. One bite at a time. Yeah. All right, final thoughts, Mr. Harris.
Want me to follow up with that? No.
I don't know. Apparently you owe a lot of people on Facebook personal apologies. Apparently we all do, yeah. They're all very angry with us based on their understanding of the law that we had just totally screwed this up.
Well, everywhere I was wrong, I am so sorry for.
Me too. Just
I'm not.
devastated.
I'm not.
I'm only sorry where I was wrong.
No, I'm not.
Oh, okay.
I'm not. I'm fine.
Wait, well, first of all, we have the premise of you being wrong.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, you'll never acknowledge that in the first place. So, all right.
All right.
Well, thank you all for tuning in, especially all of the David Fleischer fan club who joined us. I'm sure they'll be back in 2 weeks to catch us in our next episode.
Every 2 weeks.
They love us. We have a following.
Yes. I don't know how I didn't even know we were talking about this until the show started.
Sure. All right. Well, thank you all for tuning in, and we will see you again in 2 weeks.